Right, good afternoon. Welcome to the final session of DSF London 2024. It's my great pleasure to be able to introduce our two speakers, Isha and Rupali from Twilio. They're going to be talking about making MMM work for B2B marketing. Isha relishes the challenge of unraveling the narratives within data and presenting a compelling story that resonates with diverse audiences in order to shape marketing and maximize ROI. Rupali's been working in sales and marketing analytics for about 10 years. She's helped several companies optimize media mix and understand the impact of their marketing strategies using MMM and MTA. More recently, she's been working in B2B businesses and for the first time has been using MMM in B2B settings. So over to Isha and Rupali.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Rupali. This is Isha. And we are a part of the marketing analytics and strategy team at Twilio. And we're going to be talking about building MMM at a B2B company. What's your name? Sorry. Like Johnny introduced, this was the first time that we built this at a B2B company. And it was quite an experience. So I'm excited to be sharing some of our learnings with everybody here. A little bit about me. I'm Rupali. I'm from India. I've been living in London for about 11 years. I've worked in marketing analytics for 10 years out of those 11. And some of the companies that I've worked for are Sky, King, PayPal, and now at Twilio. I'm a mom to a toddler. She's going to be 2 next week. And that's my other full-time job. It's a lot of work. I recently, as I came back from my mat leave, I felt a little bit out of touch with what I was doing and with the wider data community, and that's why I felt the need to engage a bit more. Hence, I'm here and sharing what we're building. That's my email, and if you ever want to get in touch, either LinkedIn or email is best.
And next slide. That's me. I'm from India as well. I moved to London just last year. I was in New York before. That's where I went to school. That's where I started my career with Twilio. Unlike Rupali, this is my first marketing analytics gig. I have worked with different marketing and advertising agencies before, but to do analytics work and understand what ROI we get on the marketing activities that we do, that's the first time at Twilio. You're loving it so far. Apart from all this, I am a wildlife enthusiast. I make sure that I visit at least one wildlife sanctuary at least once a year. I am going to Tanzania this year. If anybody wants to talk more about that, I am more than happy to talk about that as well. Now, to talk about what we are here for, next slide. We are going to talk a lot about how we implemented MMM at Twilio. And before that, I wanted to understand if people know what Twilio actually does. When you talk about Twilio, people usually say communications, API, and these are all great words, but what do we actually do? And in one of my early interviews at Twilio, I was asked, okay, Isha, I understand this. You understand what Twilio definition is. How do you explain it to your grandmom? What do you tell your grandmom that what Twilio does? We've all booked a cab, right? We've always spoken to the driver. We have texted with the driver. The driver never gets your phone number. You never get the driver's phone number. Still, the conversation is happening. And that's what Twilio empowers. Whenever a business wants to talk to its customer, that's where Twilio comes into picture. So, and our role here at Twilio is to figure out whenever our marketers, our advertisers are going out there and figuring out who these businesses are, to understand if they are reaching the right audience, and if they are, what is the return on whatever marketing dollars they are spending. Over to you.
All right, so what is media mix modeling? How many people are actually from marketing analytics have heard of MMM before? Okay, fair few. And how many are from B2C companies or actually B2B companies? Is B2B specifically of interest to people? Great, okay, couple. All right, MMM is hot right now. It is talked about quite a lot. If you work in the field of marketing analytics, I'm sure you've seen it pop up on your LinkedIn feed. Why now? What is making MMM come back? MMM is actually not new at all. A lot of companies have been using it since the 1980s because as FMCG brands started investing heavily in TV out-of-home marketing, they needed to measure what was the ROI of all of the marketing activities they were doing. And the way they did that is, well, unlike in the digital world where we sort of knew who was watching our ad campaigns, back in the day, we didn't know who was actually exposed to our TV campaigns. The way people did that is building MMM models. What is MMM? MMM stands for Marketing Mix Modeling or Media Mix Modeling. What is your marketing mix? It's the way an advertiser distributes budget between different marketing channels. And MMM model, or an econometrics model, which you may have heard, it's the same thing. It estimates the impact of each of those marketing channels on sales, and we try to calculate an ROI of every channel. How do we think about what is MMM? It's basically building a mathematical equation out of everything that is impacting the KPI that you want to measure. So for example, if you wanted the number of leads that are coming into coming through your website, what is actually having an impact? You've got some base level of leads, and I have a little infographic later that will help clarify this a little bit more. But this is earned through your brand equity. Because Twilio has been around for many, many years, some certain level of leads will always come into our business just by people knowing about who Twilio is and that they are out there and that they build communications APIs. We will always get a certain level of leads. On top of this, we can layer on advertising and try to isolate the impact of all of our different advertising channels on our leads as well, on top of which we also have some other factors. So MMM model is very holistic. You're not just measuring marketing, you're also measuring the impact of a lot of external events on your business as well, which is why these models typically take a long time to build. And we can go into that. But basically, it's a time series model that quantifies the impact of all the factors affecting your business over time. This is a DCOM chart, which is a typical output of an MMM model. You have your base level of sales, on top of which you can layer in factors like competition. We can use various variables to build in competition or quantify competition, but once you put this in the model, it can help you understand how much competition is taking away from your base level of sales. On top of this, we can build in pricing factors. How much did your increase in price actually take away from your sales? You can build in advertising. That's your positive impact. It's going to layer on top. You can build in discounts, content, etc. And this is a typical output that would help you understand, okay, this is what is actually driven by my advertising, but there's everything else that I also need to know about to actually measure the impact and isolate the impact of advertising here. Now, actually, before I move on, we can build this for both B2B and B2C companies, but there are some fundamental differences between how marketing works for B2B and B2C that Isha will take us through.
Thank you. We all know what B2B, B2C companies are. I don't want to get into that definition, but what makes it even more difficult when we are building this for a B2B company? The number one is when we are talking about a B2C company, we are looking at sales. We are looking at the revenue impact that comes in from our marketing efforts. And that's something that's just tangible. We can figure out, okay, this is how much we spend, this is the sales we got. But for a B2B company, what we care about are the leads. Leads are the customers who come to our website and say, hey, I want to talk to somebody from your sales team and see how we can implement Twilio. That's not tangible. We don't really know what revenue impact comes out of that particular lead. Second big is a relationship. When it comes to a B2B company, when it comes for a company like Twilio, relationship has been a key factor for the money that we're driving home today. I'll give you one example that just happened. We closed a $1 million deal recently, and when we backtracked the deal, we figured out the CEO of that company actually went for a sports event that Twilio had organized some months back. 1 week into that, a product manager downloaded a white paper from our website, and 2 weeks into that, we actually closed the deal. So there are so many things that happened gradually that led to that $1 million deal. And the third most important thing is the time, the sales cycle. When it comes to a B2C company, you go to the website, you make your purchase, maybe you ponder upon it for some time, but within a week or two, you make a decision whether you want it or whether you don't want it. When it comes to B2B, when it comes to implementing this at Twilio, the average sales cycle could be anywhere between 3 to 24 months. That means an MQL came in today. We've spent so much marketing dollars today, but we are going to figure out if it was successful or not after 24 months. That makes it even more difficult. Next slide. This is just a small image of showing like where marketing plays an important role. Left-hand side is B2C, where you say add to cat, and OK, the sales cycle is completed. When it comes to B2B, you see our ads, you come to our website, you fill the form, you say talk to sales. That's where the sales cycle starts. And that is what is making deploying MMM even more difficult for us. Let's talk about how the sales cycle at Twilio has worked. One thing at a time. MQL is what I just spoke about. Somebody comes to our website, raises their hand, and say that, hey, I want to talk to sales. That's when an MQL is created for us. Say, for example, 100 MQLs came in. Then there's a sales outreach process. When I say sales outreach, that means somebody from our sales team actually went ahead and sent an email or tried reaching out to this person who actually filled the form. There's fraud there. There are bad email IDs there. So out of 100, say, for example, only 80 were the customers who were reached. Out of these 80, then we see if the customer answers the call or replies to our email. In that process, we leave out more 30, maybe 30 people didn't reply. So now out of this 100, we are down to 50 at Connect. That means we have a connect with the customer. After that, there is a meeting that the sales team tries to book with the customer where they come together and figure out how to implement Twilio. For that meeting, we again lose some customers. Again, say, for example, we lost even more 30 there. So now we're down to 20. Out of these 100, there are only 20 people left where the meetings are booked. And after that, where the sales qualified lead is created, where our sales team actually decide that, hey, this is a viable lead. We want to talk to this customer. Let's see how much revenue this customer can bring in. That's SQL. And in that process, we again lose some 10 customers. So now from 100, we are at 10 customers. So 10 out of everything that we are spending, only 10 customers are actually sales qualified lead. Next slide. To make it even more difficult, the first 3 stages, where it's MQL, sales outreach, sales connect, it's an automated process. That means a click of a button, our sales team can actually mark these in our system. But when it comes to meetings booked and SQLs, we rely heavily on our sales team. Whatever they put in the system is what we rely on. They sometimes put good information, sometimes they don't put. Sometimes the dates are never added. So the human interference makes it even more difficult for us to measure marketing impact.
That is all to say that our job is much harder building MMM for a B2B company than it is for a B2C. Now to go into our learnings a little bit as we were building this all for Twilio. When we did the first iteration of the project, we decided to focus on marketing qualified leads. But very slowly, we realized that marketing qualified leads aren't actually an indication for anything. Just because someone came to our website and says, oh, I want to talk to sales, oftentimes they are support requests. Oftentimes they don't have the budget to actually implement Twilio at the moment. And that's why only 10% of those actually actually become sales qualified leads, where a salesperson says, yes, there is a real opportunity here. Out of those very few closed won, by the way. What should be our closed won rate? From
maybe 4%?
OK, there you go. So 4% of everybody who actually comes in and says, oh, I want to talk to sales, actually generates revenue for us at the end of the day. The reason we focused on marketing qualified leads, and again, marketing qualified leads are people just coming in and saying, filling our talk to sales form on our website, is because that's the easiest top of funnel metric that marketing influences, right? But that's no good, just because of the quality of the metric itself. What we really wanted to model and should have modeled is sales qualified leads. That's where the value lies. But we found this very difficult in the first iteration of the project that we did, because there's very little correlation between our marketing spend and our sales qualified leads. And this is because of simply the time that it takes for someone to come in, oh, I want to talk to you, to actually become a sales qualified lead. A lot of people, when you read literature out there, you go to a lot of, when I was building this, I did a lot of research. It's like, okay, how have other people done it? And a lot of people suggest having lags of your media variables in the model to be able to say that, oh, okay, let's say that you shift all of your demand gen budget or your digital budget by 3 weeks. Does that have better correlation? We tested everything. No, it does not have better correlation, just because there's no consistency between when this actually becomes a sales qualified lead. 3 weeks is just an average. Sometimes it's 7 weeks by the time we actually get hold of the customer. Sometimes it's 1 week. So there wasn't very good correlation. And this is why this is a very important learning that I actually I haven't found on many websites. And if you do work for a B2B company and implement MMM for a B2B company, I hope this learning is useful. But what we learned, this slide should have been animated for you to see this properly, but bring the metric that is generating revenue closer to the date of when they interacted with marketing. This is just to say that, let's say on 3rd of May, you have a sales qualified lead, right? When it came into the funnel was 2nd of April. So anchor all of your sales qualified leads on the date of the marketing touch point. That way, you are still anchored on the date of the touch point, but you are filtering your KPI itself by quality. And then when you build a model, you have a closer relationship to revenue than you would have if you had just modeled marketing qualified leads. Some of our other learnings, if you're not from a B2B company, I don't know if this will interest you, but I'll go through them quickly anyway. We had a significant amount of cannibalization in our media strategy. One thing that a lot of B2B companies tend to do is throw all their money on Google search. Anybody who comes in and searches for communications API, Twilio's name should be at the very top. Fair, sure. But all we are doing, and this is something that is being talked about a lot in the industry these days, which is the difference between demand capture and demand generation. What you are doing by throwing all your money at Google PPC is just capturing demand. A lot of our money was actually going into the branded keywords. People are coming looking for Twilio, and we are showing them Twilio and paying a lot of money for it. That probably would have come into our funnel anyway. We realized this very quickly, just because when the climate changed when I mean climate, I mean economic climate, changed in 2023, a lot of the tech companies were doing layoffs. We naturally cut 70% of our marketing budget. Imagine the impact on our leads. 70% of our marketing budget was cut, but our leads only reduced by 10%. All that meant was that we were throwing away a lot of our money. But it's not quite as simple as that, which brings me to the learning number 3, which is customers don't distinguish between our products as much as we do. By which I mean, we have a smaller product, and because a lot of people are not here who work, you're not familiar with Twilio as much, but we have a contact center solution called Flex, right? Which we often talk about it within the company as something that is much harder to sell than our messaging API. It's a very low price point. People are able to buy it much quicker, whereas Flex is a much heavier lift. It takes a while for people to be convinced that they want to buy Flex. But we were advertising that. And we were advertising that to contact center audiences. What we learned through our MMM model is this was a completely new set of audience that we were advertising to, which actually created demand, which in turn drove a lot of leads for our messaging customers, our flagship product as well. This is mainly because when people think of Twilio, they think of the messaging API. So that's why the impact was the biggest on our flagship product, which is our messaging API. But this is all to say that a lot of companies tend to think of their products as in silos, and so did we. We were like, oh, we can't spend on Flex that much because the ROI is not huge at the moment. But actually, what we did not consider at the time is how much impact our Flex budget was having on our overall business. We were driving a lot of business with that little amount of money, but into our messaging leads, not for the same product as we were advertising, but for our flagship product, which was also useful. We don't have data here, because it would have been questionable to put a lot of this data in writing. But this is a little bit of our anecdotal learnings. And if you want to chat a little bit more about this, on how we uncovered this, we'd be very happy to have a chat later. Which brings me to holistic marketing measurement. Is MMM the answer? Because another thing that is very popular in the industry is multi-touch attribution. So Isha, over to you to take us through MTA versus MMM.
So we have made our MMM model. Does that mean that MTA is of no use now? Do we get rid of our multi-touch attribution and not think about it at all? It's not as simple as that, as I say that. MMM, it depends where you are and what your objective is when you're building MTA or MMM. MMM requires a lot of time to build, and it requires a lot of data. It is said that at least 2 years of historical data is what your model is based on. That's not the case with MTA. When it comes to multi-touch attribution model, whether you have 2 or 3 weeks of data if your company is in your early stages, that's when you can start building your multi-touch attribution as well. Second, most important, is multi-touch attribution is ground up. It looks at individual channel, it looks at individual campaigns, and figure out how your marketing performance is driven, versus MMM is a holistic view. It helps you understand that, okay, you spend so much money, what return are you getting when? So it depends what you want to calculate, whether you want your data on your campaign level, whether you want to understand how your marketing is doing as a whole. That's where you decide MTA versus MMM. Go ahead.
And that's why these days everybody is talking about unified marketing measurement, which is, it's not just MTA versus MMM, it is how MMM, MTA, and incrementality experiments come together and form the backbone of marketing measurement for any company. This infographic is from a Google white paper that they have recently launched on unified marketing measurement. They coined the term. I'll give you an example. There are three things where MMM fails, where MTA could really help. So for example, MMM by design works on the fluctuations in your marketing spend. If you are in a small company who is spending $500 on Google PPC, and it's an always-on channel for you, MMM probably won't be able to tell you if, like, the true impact of that Google PPC budget. Because if it's an always-on channel, you've never switched it off, you've never you won't be giving the model a chance to learn what happens as you increase or decrease the budget. It basically builds on the variation that your marketing budget creates in your KPI, right? That's where MTA is useful. MMM is more useful if you're investing across multiple channels, multiple products, and you have a significant amount of budget that you want more of a top-down view of. Now, where experiments come in is if MTA and MMM are giving you very different answers. And that's when it's wise to run an experiment. It can either be geo-testing, or it can be a little bit of an A/B test to try to understand which one is telling you the truth, and calibrate your ROI measurement across the two. As you build MMM for any business, a few questions to ask yourself are, do you have enough budget? So like I said on the last slide, you need a good amount of variability in your model, in your marketing budget, to be able to measure the impact correctly on any KPI. Otherwise, if your budget is really small, or if your product or company is really new, you probably won't be able to get a very good answer with MMM. And it's a significant amount of effort. It's not worth investing so much time gathering all the market data, everything around it, if you have very little budget. I would discourage you from trying to build MMM. What dependent variable should you be using? So this is our learning, which we talked about in the previous section, which was your metric needs to have the right amount of balance between connection to revenue as well as correlation with marketing efforts. So MQLs, for example, had high correlation with marketing efforts, but not as much connection with revenue. Sales qualified leads is the perfect balance. If we started building a model just to understand the impact of marketing on overall revenue, we would have failed. Like, we tried. We just failed. Because there's not enough correlation. A few outliers will always outweigh the overall time series for revenue. And that's why you just need to be mindful of which KPI you're using. And then what explanatory variables to use. This is where industry knowledge or your institutional knowledge of your company comes in. And that's why MMM models cannot be built in isolation. Because you really need experts of your business to tell you what is having an impact on your KPIs, things that you may have overlooked. The reason MMM is a holistic model, and the reason you need all of this industry knowledge, is because if you have major factors impacting your KPIs missing from your model, then you are incorrectly calculating the impact of marketing. Because there's something missing there, you're probably overestimating it or underestimating it. So these are things to be mindful of as you build the model itself. Now, how and where to get started? First step is getting buy-in from your business to run this MMM experiment. Once upon a time, this would have been really difficult. To give you an example, I used to work for Candy Crush, which relied heavily on their multi-touch attribution model. We had to really make a case to run this MMM experiment, because it's a significant amount of time investment of your data science team, and you had to prove value of where MMM is adding value on top of MTA. However, now in the privacy-first era, nobody is fighting this, because MMM is the only way very soon after 2025 to be able to measure your marketing efforts. So all companies, digital first, any kind of company is moving towards MMM and putting them in their portfolio of marketing measurement framework. How to build it? Keep it simple. Start with a linear regression and get more technical from there. There's a lot of packages out there, but if anybody is curious, and I might be, I'm biased, I can say that openly, but I don't believe that Bayesian MMM is all that useful. It is complicated for no reason, and actually most of the answers you can get from linear regression. Keep it simple for yourself and start with linear regression. You can always make it more technical as you go. There's other ways to quickly build things as well, depending on your company. You can use, MMM used to be very slow once upon a time. Teams used to take a quarter to update models, for example. Now, I would say it takes 1 quarter to build the initial models, yes, but then the updates are much quicker, just because you can bake in things like variable selection. You can use Aramax to control for some of the seasonality. So there's a lot of things that you can do to make the entire process much quicker. And then agency versus build in-house. We had a big debate about this as well, because if you don't have enough resource, it can become quite, like one person building this is a chore. Like, it's really hard. But it's like, the thing we used internally when we talked about it was, do we want to build a Ferrari or do we want to lease one? The thing with using an agency is that you lose all of the IP. Once you've built the model, once you quit ties with that agency, you're likely going to lose a lot of the results. So I think it is worth building in-house. It also costs quite a lot of money. Like, we were quoted, we have a marketing budget of what, $20 million a year, and we were quoted $200K, $250K to build this, to build MMM on an ongoing basis. I don't think it's worth that much money. You can do 70% of what an agency can do with just one data scientist focused on the project, and then you build from there. Like, you don't need, prove the value internally. If your marketing budget increases enough for you to justify the cost, then yes, go ahead, build it. I think that was all from us. Questions? Thank you.
Thanks very much. Got a question over there, I think.
Thank you you so much. That was really, really interesting. I have 2 questions, if that's okay. The first one is, what tools did you use to actually build the model? Was it like a Python script? Did you do it?
It was just a Python notebook. Honestly, a linear regression. We did not go into using any of the packages. I've used Meta's Robin before, but for the first time, building it for the first time, I thought just use linear regression, and then we can always go more technical from there. Yeah.
That's really useful. And secondly, I'm the solo data scientist trying to build this for my company at the moment. And I had a question about stakeholder buy-in. So how did you get people tagging all of their campaigns using UTMs and that kind of thing? How did you get people on board
we
with
were
piece?
a little bit lucky in that regard because there was a project that came just a quarter previous to us building this, which was understanding return on ad spend, but using MTA. And for that, they did a lot of the tagging themselves. Like they had done the tagging, which is why our job was much easier when we started building MMM. But in terms of depending on what company you work for, it's likely that they are significantly investing a lot of their budget behind digital marketing, right? They're not going to be able to understand the ROI of any of what they do after 2025. I know Google has pushed out stopping the cookie tracking till 2025, but after that, it's going to get significantly harder for them to rely on MTA, and that's how you can position it, which is can we be prepped for the future now because it's coming by end of next year.
Any more questions? Yes.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It was quite insightful. I just wanted to understand, I know that you had explained how marketing qualified leads, when you try to get the correlation with the marketing spend, it's really not there, and you switch to sales qualified leads. When doing that, do you cut out days or weeks that do not have a sales qualified leads to improve the correlation, or how exactly would that be done? Because I imagine if you're moving from, let's say, 100 people who come to the site, and then you end up with 10 people, you would lose out on a chunk of the days that marketing spend was actually run.
That's actually a good point, and all that means is that it'll be 0. For a time series analysis, that's okay if it goes to 0. Did you have something to add?
Exactly, that's what I was saying.
Yeah. That's fine.
Any more questions? Oh, on there.
Thank you both. That was awesome. 2 questions, if I may. I think you touched upon this on the last slide. Some companies have very long sales cycle, a lot of data to process. What type of things need to happen to make it quicker every time you run the model? Version 1, version 2, because the cycles will likely not get shorter, the sales cycle. So some hints to run the model faster, because sometimes we need to make decisions more dynamically. The second question is, at what stage does a company need to be at to really effectively use MMM? You mentioned some things earlier about, is it too early, is it too late? So what stage in a company's life cycle, the growth stage, would be best to implement this?
I think on the first question, what can we do to make it faster? Do you mean what can we do to actually cut the time of the sales cycle itself?
The actual data processing to get insights.
Okay, I think data process is quite automated. So when we build the first pipeline, we set the groundwork for things to update quite quickly. If you have set up your data pipeline correctly, hopefully things go smoother from there. But in terms of if things are changing in your company quite a lot from the perspective of what tech you're using, then that is an ongoing challenge and a conversation to have with the centralized data team on why we are changing the tech so often and what is making us switch from one platform to the other. I don't know if that answers your question. Anisha, do you want to add anything to it? Yeah? Does that answer your question? Yeah? Okay. Your second question was around... I think it depends, again, on the product. So for example, at King, we used to run MMM models even for products that we have just launched to be able to quickly correct our media strategy for product launches as well. And the way that we would do that is at King, our MMM modeling worked very differently, which was we used soft launch data, because when you've launched a new product, you've likely launched it in multiple markets first. So you had some data from the soft launches that you did. But also, if you think about time series analysis, you can use other countries where you're not advertising as baseline for what the base looks like and add your advertising on top. So that kind of thing can work as a quick fix. But in terms of at what stage a B2B company needs to be, and in a bigger sense, I think, again, once your marketing budget is big enough for you to warrant, like you're investing across different markets, different channels, different tactics, that's when and if MTA is failing you, it's not giving you the full answer anyway, that's when you start investing into MMM. Also, for a good MMM model, you need at least 2 or 3 years worth of data, so that's another point.
Thank you. I was going to ask you, how do you ensure that the baseline is correct? Maybe it's what you just mentioned. Is it actually by using regions where you are not running any activity?
So baseline is something that you really need to be careful about, and that's where a little bit of prior knowledge of MMM is really helpful. You have to make sure that in all of the variables, you are applying the correct transformations. I'll give you an example. When we built this model, the first time around that we built the first set of models, we did not, there are certain variables that you need to debase. Because, for example, if I'm using Google Trends data for my competitive impact, right? Google Trends data is possibly, for the 3 years that I'm looking at it, it's fluctuating between 70 and 100. When I test it in the model, I need to make sure I debase it. I only take the fluctuations, I don't take the base. Because that kind of thing will impact the base of the model. It will probably push it up because the competitive impact will look much bigger than it really is. So that's the kind of thing that you need to be mindful of. And it is worth, there's a lot of papers out there on how to start building MMM. We can discuss, I can send you a couple of good ones as well, but it lists the correct transformations for all variable types. And that's something we should keep in mind as we build the model, because that will make sure the base is correct. Yeah.
Just another note.
Thanks. Just thinking again about the timelines, and to this point about in the B2B world, you've got this lag between the MQL and a final sale. How frequently are you reforecasting and updating your model, and how frequently are you finding business decision makers actually reviewing those budgets, given that you've got this kind of longer lead time?
Our budgets are reviewed quarterly. So we don't optimize real time as we would for a digital business. Like I remember for our gaming, for King, we used to review our budget every week, how much we were spending and the ROI that each channel was bringing in. But for Twilio, the planning process is slower. So everything is slower to make sure we're keeping up with this delay in the sales cycle.
So I've got another question. So I know that you had recommended that ideally people or businesses should start with linear regression for a start and then build up from there. For a company that is more robust, what would you recommend? And I'm asking because I noticed whilst you were going through the whole presentation, MMM in a B2C is almost like the opposite of everything you've said. So I'm curious to understand, when it comes to picking the right models or the right frameworks to use for MMM in a B2B, would there also be a difference in what would be ideal for a B2B compared to what a B2C would traditionally use?
I think it depends on the sorry, I was too slow. I think it depends on the business type. So for example, if pricing is a huge part of, if you're using MMM for a FMCG company, for example, you really care about price elasticity because that's an important output. That's where you could think about building a log linear model instead. Again, it depends on what kind of output you're looking for. The reason I don't always advocate for log models is because, again, to understand, the decomp chart that I showed, it's very complicated to build a decomposition chart if you're using a log model. And then, just statistically, it creates complication. Whereas if you just applied the right transformations to certain variables, you would get the answer anyway. So that's why linear models are definitely a preference. But there are other things out there that you can do. So for example, again, depends on the business. But if you tend to have a business where, let's say, you're Facebook, and you're trying to model how many users you get across the world, but you only advertise really in US and UK, but you don't advertise in any of the other markets. You could use other markets as a proxy to understand what your base level of users are, and then build your dependent variables on top. So you can use different kinds of models, just depending on the problem you're trying to solve. Yeah.
Hi. Thanks for going through this. It was really insightful. I just have one question on how you connect MQL and SQLs because there's a lag time. You mentioned that if SQL is the right metric, then you need to connect it closer to the time you got the MQLs for better forecasting. Is there a specific way you map it? Because so I work in an agency, which you don't advocate, but when we ask for leads and their actual sales data to B2B businesses, they usually give leads from some website tracking stuff like Google Analytics, which has no information, and then the sales is again siloed. So is there any specific way you map it, or
Isha, do you want to?
So what we do here is when you get the SQL data, right, though you don't know, like which MQL led to that SQL because it's all connected, correct? So I ran a campaign today, and one MQL got in, and SQL came after 3 months. So though you don't know what campaigns what you did then, this one MQL is connected to this SQL is connected to this MQL. So that SQL is then plotted on the MQL date. So we are anchoring everything on that MQL date. That's what we did here. You want to add something there?
And in terms of how the company can do that, their CRM tool should do that. Salesforce should allow them to do that. If they have set up their Salesforce correctly, they should be able to map it back. Yeah.
Hi. I'm interested to know more about the model and if there's any specific data features that were more indicative of a potential client or a potential SQL or SQL, sorry. So yeah, is there any learnings you got out of it?
So we haven't built the SQL models fully yet, but I can talk about MQLs and what brought in MQLs. I think MQLs was a mixed bag. We found at the time, some of the learnings that I shared as well, there was a lot of cannibalization, which meant the way that we structured our models, we modeled organically MQLs that come in, leads that were coming in organically, separate to leads that were coming in through paid channels. And what we found was there was for our less known products, there was a halo impact on organic leads. So whatever we were measuring for our less popular products actually had a bigger impact on our business than we thought. Whereas for some of the things where we were investing quite a lot of money, so for example, getting messaging leads or brand leads, we had cannibalization impact. So the impact was overestimated. A lot of the leads were driven by marketing, as you would expect. We found a huge impact of a couple of our competitors, which we anticipated as well. So some of the competitors we have are like Vonage, Cinch, etc. So some of those showed up in our models, which was a learning for the company that, oh, that's not a competitor I think about very often, but clearly that is having an impact on the business in the US. I'm thinking any other major...
I think you covered.
Yeah, yeah, that was the main. Marketing had a huge impact, is all I can say. On leads. SQLs is going to be another story, which I'll keep people posted on.
Hey. Oh, bloody hell, it's loud. So I'm not massively familiar with MMN. I'm more familiar with multi-touch attribution. But what I'm curious about is, so the point at which you're capturing the data is obviously the form submission, right? But the marketing spend comes before then, in the large part, in digital, outreach and such. So while you're establishing the trend line off the back of the MQL, it's trend comparison. Is that MMN? Am I accurate there? Because you're obviously comparing your total spend for marketing and budget relates to pre-MQL activity. Right. Whereas MQL starts, but you're obviously attributing a higher marketing spend that you're comparing a trend against. Is that accurate?
I'm not sure I fully understand.
Okay, we can catch up after.
Okay, we will.
I guess my point here is that, say for example, I'm trying to sell a multi-touch attribution model to the business. We spend a crap load on ad data, and I can say, hey, if I map all of this, I can tell you social content, which is obviously not paid, drove a 20% upside in conversion. That's a very easy thing for me to sell the project on. What I was trying to establish is, what did you sell the MMM project on as an upside to drive
the biggest upside was that 70% of our budget was cannibalizing.
Yeah.
Like, you could reduce your budget by 70% and still get the same amount of leads. Although the marketing team did not appreciate that learning fully, but the rest of the business did.
Right, I think we probably should stop grilling Rupali and Isha at this point. Let's thank them again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So it's time to close this session of DSF 2024. Thank you very much for all joining us today. Can we give a big round of applause to all the speakers, volunteers, and particularly CodeNode staff? I hope you've all enjoyed it. There's Oktoberfest on the 19th of October. The ballot is open already, so please do apply for tickets for that. And now's your chance to go and network outside at the bar. Thanks very much. Bye.